Hi guys, before we kick off tonight's podcast, I wanted to just talk about my latest upcoming comic book, In Purgatory, Issue 6, The Sins of the Father. In a week's time, it'll be launching on Kickstarter, so if you're interested, go and check out the pre-launch page, which is currently live. The link will be below. Check it out, and I hope you can follow along and support this campaign for the next comic. Thanks.
Welcome to another adventure of the Halftone Effect.
Welcome back, everyone, to another issue of The Halftone Effect. I am your host, Kieran Jack, and tonight I am joined by a very special guest and a brother from another mother, Pete Muzz Murry, not to be mistaken with the singer, Pete Murry.
Fourth time's a charm. You always that's a saying I feel is gonna take off. It may not have started yet,
Thank you for joining us
but it's gonna get some legs.
for the third time now.
Fourth time lucky.
So, for those listening at home, we've actually recorded this podcast back in January.
But 5 is party of 5, so that'd be kind of like Matthew Fox would be all around that.
For the fires, when the country was on fire, and our Prime Minister took a holiday.
Before he did.
That's a whole other subject. But we record this episode with a few beers and a hot summer's evening, and it was a good episode. Unfortunately, the audio stuffed up because of someone in particular. I'm not pointing fingers or naming names, but we lost the episode. So tonight, Muzz has very kindly decided to come back on and re-record a special episode of The Halftone Effect. And in the process of that, I have managed to screw it up 3 times tonight. So we're off to a great start, guys. So going back to what we're talking about prior to my error in recording, we're talking about our upbringing in the comic book world. Now, I got my start with comic books, but yours is a little different. Do you want to tell listeners where it all started for you, Muzz?
Yeah, for me it was all just, before school, after school, it was just cartoons. Pretty much was a break from reality during the day, which was awesome. You could jump into a different world, seeing all these characters grow, have powers, and do things that jumping on the trampoline want to do and try in the backyard yourself. And, I see him come on the big screen. It was, the 90s were horrible. We had a whole bunch of Marvel movies coming out with top-end celebrities that just wanted to play the roles. And then we finally hit 2008, and that's when you had Iron Man come out and started what essentially ran for a 12-year franchise, 23 movies, and then culminated with, Endgame last year in April, which was awesome. But, the kind of thing where it doesn't matter if they're good, they're trash. They've got one good scene or the whole thing's awesome front to back. But, man, if they make movies that I watched as a kid as a cartoon on the big screen, I'll watch it. I don't care. You're going to throw in Transformers, make another 20. That's cool. If they tie up with the Fast and Furious franchise, I'll absolutely see that. It doesn't matter.
Oh, God. I'm glad we're debating comic books versus movies because you've just pretty much summed up my hatred towards Hollywood.
Yeah. Oh, could you imagine Vin Diesel taking on Bumblebee? It'd be it'd be The Rock, actually.
Because we've already seen it in the Bumblebee movie with John Cena taking on Bumblebee. Fantastic. I'm glad we're doing this episode of the podcast because that's actually going to be a lot of fun. Comic books versus the movies. Many people who listen to the podcast know my angst towards some of Hollywood's portrayal on superheroes and comic books as such, to the treating of the source material. But I thought this would be a fun episode, and hearing you just shoot off then, I think it's gonna be good. I'm looking forward to jumping into this episode. But yeah, your background, again, it differs to what mine was, and I think sometimes that's a good thing. It kind of makes you step away from the source material and take it for its face value. So basically tonight, what we're going to do, guys, we're going to talk about the comic books versus the movies. We're going to make cases. We're going to rebut against them. I guess it's a mini debate, Muzz. I guess you'd call it that, a battle royale. But yeah, we'll talk about where it started, and I think the big thing that kicked off the movies was the classic Christopher Reeve Superman film, which kind of changed it all. and from there it just kind of it's grown out of control. Like, look at the fluctuation in the films that we've had in the last, I'm going to say 45 years. I think it's 45 years since Superman came out. So for me, growing up as a kid and reading comic books and then seeing movies as a kid as well, it was cool to see. But as I grew up, I kind of saw the source material, separate itself from the actual films. And as we were discussing before, there were some really dodgy films back in the 90s. How was that for you, Muzz?
Oh, it was very heartbreaking, but at the same time, I think I was young enough to be just happy that they were being made. But then as you get older, it's just the amount of cheese they chuck on that pizza is ridiculous. And they just got big name actors at the time and thought, yep, this will work. Just chuck them in. Let's just do it. Let's just make the film. And as if they try to just, it felt like they didn't check the source material. I think, what is it? Hulk, the first Hulk film, not the first Hulk film we got with Eric Bana. It takes like an hour and 40 minutes until you actually get some action going on. And the progress of the stories just was so draining. And to be a kid and try to sit through that was just way too much. So they were trying to just put in one scene.
Yeah, I mean, that film kind of... It actually got me into reading Hulk comic books. I never was a huge Hulk reader, but it made me want to go and read Hulk comic books. And I think the first ones I picked up were the Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb series called Hulk Grey, and that was incredible. It was his origin story. You know, you got a bit of a dive into that, and that's where it kind of started for me. But that movie really didn't interpretate that character as being anything like the comics. It was a very arty film.
Yeah, even the screen transitions they use as well. They tried to almost force the comic book visuals into it.
Yeah, and it was really, really... Yeah, it was almost like a art student film. And Ang Lee's work was very well renowned by the time that he took on this project. But I haven't watched it. I don't think I've watched that film in for 20 years. I reckon.
Oh.
Because, kind of...
I reckon...
I don't think it's aged well either.
I reckon the last time I saw it might have been... I think we might have watched it like 12 years ago for a laugh. I reckon we watched that back in the day.
I think it's a double-edged sword too, saying that, because like the likes of Hulk got me into reading Hulk comics. Like, the films can kind of lead you onto a comic book that you never may have read before, vice versa as well. But yeah, that whole, what was it, early 2000s, wasn't it?
Oh, I can do a quick check, but yeah, it would have been very early.
Yeah, so it's the like of Daredevil, Hulk,
2003,
the first X-Men movie. Yeah, so that was when it really started to pick up for Marvel in the cinematic realm.
Yeah, because I think X-Men would have been the big one that made money. That they would have been like, all right, sweet, cool, this can print money, but then they just didn't care about the quality they were chucking in. You go back and watch the first X-Men, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But then, they've kept up the standard to date with Dark Phoenix, and they've got a trend. Like, they haven't deterred away from their model. They're like, well, we're still going to make it. Are they still going to watch it? No, we're not. We're good.
Look, and it's funny because, like, I'm probably going to lose a little listeners saying this, but I'm not a big X-Men fan. I wasn't huge on the comics, and I wasn't huge on the movies when they were coming out. For anyone listening to the podcast, I'm very much Batman. I'm a DC
you're very
guy.
Batman. You've got that tattooed all over your body. You're definitely Batman.
I got it tattooed on one arm. I've got a sleeve of Batman characters, but let's not over exaggerate it. I haven't got face tattoos.
I was about to mention a part of the body that I don't want to mention. Yeah,
but
no,
this is kid rated. But yeah, I wasn't big on the X-Men comics. and I wasn't big on the X-Men films, but it's funny you're talking about that because something came before that, and it was called Blade.
Oh, that was a very adult movie, wasn't it?
So it's kind of funny because everyone always says that X-Men started the movie, the movie trend for comic book films or the Marvel at least. And it's funny, everyone always misses Blade, and Blade was really the one that kind of kicked it off, because Blade might have not been a financial success at the cinema, but it was a cult following after it was released for the home audience. And so that's how it built from there. And it kind of like, oh, okay, we're kind of onto something here. Let's see what else we can do. And that's where it kind of started. You know, all these different properties were owned by different studios. They've seen the success of Blade, and they were kind of like, all right, let's start pushing this forward and putting it out to the world and what we can do. But yeah, I mean, the exception of like Deadpool, Logan, they're probably the closest I think I can actually enjoy.
Oh, the X-Verse. Yeah, nah. No. Oh.
Yeah, I just think that, yeah, do it for even like I said, the comic books just don't. I don't have that fandom that a lot of other guys I know who read comics love X-Men. And I'm supposed to be defending comics right now. I'm really not.
But comics don't have that intro that.
And they don't have the flickering of the pages. I mean, you don't get this cinematic opening.
Oh.
No. Oh, I can't flick the pages. I make the same
I could just
sound.
do that at the start and then go all the way to the front. Like that's
Exactly.
your little
Exactly.
like, Marvelite intro that you've made for yourself.
Yeah. But yeah, I think there was a big intake in the comic book, and that's kind of where it started with the introduction of Blade, X-Men, Hulk, Spider-Man, and then you kind of seen the Daredevils and the Fantastic Fours all start to come
Elektra.
together.
Man, we
Elektra,
got some movies.
yeah, I mean, I think there was even a moment in time where Tom Cruise was attached to do Iron Man before the Paramount began the cinematic universe. So,
could you imagine Tom Cruise playing Iron Man? Like if he did get that role and then went on to do that line in Endgame, whereas like he'd probably say I am Tom Cruise and just like, nah guys, cut it, let's send it, that's it. That's a wrap. Tom, come back. I've already left. Jumping on a couch in his trailer.
I'd rather not, but there has been whisperers going around at the moment that he could be up for the role in I think it was they were talking about Doctor Strange. They're talking about doing that. So look, honestly, nothing had surprised me. I feel as though we're at a point in time where there's a race to the multiverse.
Yeah.
Between DC and Marvel. So,
well, because DC,
I'm not saying it's going to happen.
DC did touch on that with Crisis on Infinite Earths, didn't they?
I gathered they did. I think I saw like a poster art for it online somewhere, but I haven't caught up with those kind of shows in a long time.
Once we found out it was like same place that did Gossip Girl, that sort of hurt a lot.
And that's a very good point. It's again the source material just being creamed over. They don't really care about it, and for me, a lot of the DC TV shows just haven't hit the mark where they could have. They could have really taken it on. And I think, like for me now, watching the HBO Max series come out, there's a chance that it could actually be good. I know Swamp Thing. I don't know if you've seen Swamp Thing, the new Swamp Thing series. That was fantastic. It had a horror element to it. May have not been gruesome horror, but it had a PG-13 style horror to it, and that was really cool. And it was also just disappointing to see it get cancelled after a season. Which, I guess that's the name of the game for Hollywood. If it's not making them big bucks, then why bother trying?
Yeah. it's not getting the numbers. Why are we injecting more cash into it to just have it fail?
Yeah,
it's scared of being failed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's funny because, like, I sit here and I've got the bookshelf in front of me, and watching the movies compared to watching the comics, reading the comics, they tend to, nurture the fact that it's got all this history behind it, and they lift itself up from that. Where I find the movies try to do too much outside of the comic books to make their own footing, where I feel as though they should be trying to keep that mythology into it. I know they do. They don't stray for it too far, but more recently they tend to sway off and do their own thing. The perfect example of that is the Batman vs Superman, or the Justice League film, where they've kind of just drove off in their own path and done their own thing. And without respecting that source material, they've kind of just gone, well, fuck it, we're going to do our own thing. Which is disappointing because the hype behind that has kind of lost a lot of fans in the process, me included. I felt a distaste to the superhero genre, because they kind of just shat all over the history of it.
So do you feel with, say, the source material, do you feel they don't flesh it out enough? They don't give it enough time to flesh and organically materialize itself to the story that it should be, or that they're glazing over it quick, trying to put too much into a movie? Because we've always said I know you told me that before seeing Aquaman, it's like they've crammed 7 comics into one movie.
I don't think they trust the audience. I think the studios, primarily in this case, I think DC, Warner Brothers, who own DC Comics, they're the main instigator of it. They don't trust their audience enough to try and follow the source material. I feel as though they dumb it down a lot, and in doing so, they lose some of that the mythology that's behind the characters. The best example of that is Batman killing in Batman vs Superman. The fans were very much up in arms. He doesn't do that. That's not what he does. He is a character that does not kill. And that it really did divide an audience. And it divided an audience in the best way that I see it, as the comic book audience versus the movie audience, who love the film but don't really understand the mythology behind these characters. And
a lot of people wouldn't have been too shocked with, in that movie, Batman picking up a gun. Whereas if you followed, say, the comics or know a lot about Batman, he's more of a gadget person, but he just doesn't wield weapons. Like, I think we saw the big first one of that was, Flashpoint, where Batman's dad survives, and that's Bruce Wayne that dies. And then his dad, the path that he takes because of the event, that he ends up wielding guns, which was a very cool thing to have, that you could see, well, what if Batman did go down another path and would have guns? But then in Batman vs Superman, he's packing a gun. He's got a gun. Popping off.
Yeah, and the best example of that is what you've just said is Batman vs Superman, and how they just completely took that and like, oh, he kills. And there was no reasoning why, there was no justification for it. It was basically skimmed across. And that's my gripe towards these entertainment points, whether it be TV, whether it be film. They just don't seem to want to flesh out these characters as they should be. And it comes back to the X-Men films for me. It comes back to the fact that the X-Men films, I've read the comics, Days of Future Past, the comic is a hot mess, but it tells a story. Whereas the movie, again, that was a hot mess, but the story was just, it was in shambles for me. I just couldn't. Nice. And I think from that point on, it even got worse for them. And I mean, you come from something like, and you and me went and seen First Class, and for something I didn't mention, First Class is probably the best X-Men film, I guess you'd call it. Yeah. As a whole. And
you kind of thought, okay, well, there might be a bit of a rebuilding of this world, but it pretty much got thrown away. And I mean, again, that falls back on the whole studio director narrative. They just tend to just throw it away, and it's really disappointing to see that.
They could have easily gone and told their own story, but they're like, no, we still want Hugh Jackman. Let's retcon all this stuff. Let's make another movie trying to fix everything. And then it just got more and more into itself and just started folding in, and it was just a disappointing thing. To get to a point in our lives where we're on our third Spider-Man. We've had 2 Dark Phoenix story arcs. We're up to like the 5th Batman, where it's becoming the Monday like Macbeth or something. Everyone wants to have a crack at it. I reckon give it to Bette Midler. Let's see what she can do as Batman.
Oh,
I'd watch that. I'd totally watch that. That'd be cool.
Bette Midler as Batman.
Yeah, it's just the X-Men universe is such an absolute trash. Like there are some good moments in it, don't get me wrong, but it's just they've just tried so hard, and because of big execs at the top, they just thought, nah, this will sell toys. This is where the money is. It's the merchandise. Let's go this way. But you still got to make it entertaining. It's still a movie, a cinematic experience that you've got to be in that world for a good couple of hours and not want to leave.
And coming from the side, and this is where I kind of step in now as the creator, and I feel like the effort that as a creator, or as any creator, if they're a writer, they're an illustrator, they're a letterer for the comic book industry, the effort that they go to create these worlds and building it from scratch, it's so important to have your characters and build them, and you're basically playing makeup for real. You're getting to play makeup. Like, you create characters that aren't real, but there's the effort that goes behind it to make these characters. Like, think back to when they created Batman or Spider-Man. The effort they went to create these characters, and the mythology that stands behind these people, what they believe in and what they do and why they don their underwear on their overalls. It's kind of important. It makes it kind of establishes why these characters have been followed over the last 75 years between then and now. And to have a popcorn flick come out, whether it be a blockbuster or not, and not really take that upon itself to flesh out why this character is important and rush over it and then create a flop of a movie and then reboot it, to me seems more detrimental to the industry itself. And I know for a fact that the films do not translate in sales for the stores. So people aren't going out and going, oh, fuck, I've watched... this is a bad example, but I watched Green Lantern. I'm going to go and buy Green Lantern comics. To be fair, if you've watched Green Lantern, go and buy some comic books, because you'll probably get a better education of what the character's about.
Definitely watch the Green Hornet. Have nothing to do with the Green Hornet.
Nothing to do with the Green Hornet. I don't know why it's the Green Lantern. The first thing I looked at the bookshelf and I was like, Green Lantern. I'm like, oh, that's a bad example. Yeah, I'm going to go with it. But the point is that it's important that they understand that there's a mythology, there's history behind these characters, and people do read them still. As much as it is dwindling industry, people still do read them. I actually recall when I gave you your first comic book. Do you still have that?
The Avengers Essential.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I still got that up here. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Because I mean, like, that to me was important. Giving that to you was like, this is where it all started from. I know you knew that, but it was cool to be able to pass that on to someone else. And I get a buzz out of that, giving comic books to people to read.
Yeah.
Like, dude, read this, you'll love it. And that's what I was like as a kid. I'd go into the newsagents and pick out comic books, and I'd be reading them, and I'd give them to my mates, and they'd be reading them, and I'd be like, oh, check this one out, this is really cool, Batman versus Joker, or I think Phantom, I was reading the Phantom as Spider-Man. I mean, like, that, I think that's part of the buzz of the comic book world as well, is kind of bouncing off each other, friends, whether it be at conventions, or whether it be at a friend's house, or down at a comic book store. It's about the
the camaraderie in the industry and be able to enjoy it for that appeal. But going back to going and picking up a comic book, that doesn't translate into a sale for a comic book store if there's a multi-million-dollar film that comes out, which is disappointing because you as a punter, you could gain so much more from reading those comics and checking out the film.
Oh, absolutely. They've got like little Easter eggs in there in each panel as well. It's like, all right, cool. These people show up. Where are they from? They're from this comic in this series. Go check it out. This is the issue you want. And they can tie it all in really easily. And it's a good way to reinvest or get people to invest further into the comics and just keep going. I'm like, all right, you know what? This has opened up. I didn't know anything about this character. Before I'm going to continue, I want to read everything about this character.
And it's so funny because, like, you and me saw Endgame at the cinema together, and we talked about it for ages after we watched it. But it was funny talking to other people about it at the end of it because, like, they're like, "Oh, where could they go from now?" Like, Thanos has been leading up over the last 10 years, and I was like, "There's Kang the Conqueror, there's Galactus, there's the Skrull invasion, there's the Kree versus Skrull War. I mean, it's endless. And like
Secret Wars.
Exactly. I know, like Kree have already been established, and Skrulls have been established more recently. But they're like, oh, what's Galactus and what's Kang the Conqueror? I was like, well, Kang the Conqueror is one that, and it was like there's this whole world that they really don't know, and it's sitting there waiting to be really absorbed. And another point of that I have to attack is the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man films. I mean, all of Peter Parker's enemies and stories are from Tony Stark. There's nothing that's really his own foundation. True. And it's a very big cry in the community about, well, why is it so based around Tony Stark and not around Peter Parker? And a really good argument for that is we've seen how many reboots of Spider-Man in the past 2 decades?
Oh, we've had our third sweet sequel. So we're up for our second trilogy.
Well,
which is so confusing.
Well, technically not. We're up to our fourth series, because if you include Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, there's just... It's never ending. And I mean, look what's going on at the moment. I mean, are they going to be all reintroduced into the cinematic universe?
Do you reckon that's someone playing with it though? Because there are rumors going around that Tobey Maguire and Garfield have signed on for Spider-Man. But what if it's like a cameo, Stan Lee sort of style, like just working a hot dog stand or just selling newspapers, and that's them in the movie? Do you reckon they're actually going to pull the trigger and have 3 Spider-Men?
Well,
Spider-Mans?
I don't see how you bring James. I don't see how you bring the blue man back, the blue electric man back without doing that.
Oh, they're doing that too, aren't they?
So
yeah.
I don't know. I choose not to be a speculator in that sense, because who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But to me,
sort of wait till we have popcorn and a chopped up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's exactly right. As long as the popcorn's good, Muzz.
Popcorn's got to be good. Popcorn's good. You know the movie's good.
Yeah, in most cases. Wasn't the other way around?
Yeah.
Wasn't we always said the popcorn's bad, the movie will be good?
Bad popcorn, good movie.
Exactly, yeah.
Actually, yeah, when I saw Tenet yesterday, the popcorn wasn't crash hot.
It's been that long since we've been in the movies. It's okay. We haven't been in the movies for a while, so it's understandable. But yeah, it's really hard to digest some of the stuff that goes on in the world of comic books compared to the movies, and the industry has taken a hit during the pandemic. Obviously, with comic books taking a hiatus from shipping over the last, I think it was nearly 2 to 3 months, if I'm not correct, and it affected comic book stores, which was hard amongst everything else that was going on in the world,
especially in a COVID world. Like, you can't touch anything.
Yeah,
or you shouldn't be touching anything.
And it was kind of hard for them to produce and get them out at that time. But I think we've kind of grown past that now. We've evolved, and the industry is back. But from someone who still reads comics, single trade, single issues and trades, I think that
there's going to be a change in how it's done in the next 12 months. Watching the big leagues and what they're doing, it's a little bit scary, and I don't know if it's going to be a good thing for the future of comic books. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to talk tonight about comic books versus movies, because it's the fact that the industry is, for the big leagues, it's in limbo. I know personally, as an indie creator, that there's no stopping us. We'll keep producing content while people are still reading it and consuming it. Even though we don't have conventions and we don't have the normal outlets we would in a pre-COVID world, but we'll still make content for people to read. People are going to always need to be entertained.
Oh, absolutely. Think of like lockdown laws and stuff, people staying inside. Gives them tons of time to pick up a book and have a crack at it. And even more, like, gives them a lot more time to sit back and be like, you know what? I'm going to put some pen to paper.
Yeah.
Got a lot of time on my sleeve, start writing more, start drawing more, and
exactly.
Just get the creative juice flowing.
And that's a great thing. That's, for me personally, that's been a great time to stop traveling around Australia and doing conventions and actually go, okay, well, let's start writing and let's start creating more. And I've been more productive for the first time in probably 3 years than I have when I started, which is awesome. And there are a lot of others out there that are doing exactly the same thing, which is really positive. It's really constructive. And no, that's not saying everyone needs to do it, but it's been a eye-opener. So yeah, the reason we're doing this is to talk about our own affliction towards comic books and where it came from, but also to talk about what's happening in the industry too, because it can be a little bit scary. And sorry, you're going to say?
Do you feel that there's been a saturation of superheroes, considering this is the longest time we've ticked over, it'll be almost a year without a Marvel movie.
Yeah, it's over.
Do you feel
it's over a year? Yeah, well and truly over a year.
Do you feel that the movie industry itself is saturated with that many superhero movies, that it's actually doing itself harm?
That's a good question. Yes, straight up yes. Go.
They're still making tons of money.
Rewind the clock. Rewind the clock back to 2008. Right.
Oh.
So in that year, we had Iron Man, we had The Dark Knight, we had Incredible Hulk, we had Hellboy 2, and we had something else. Punisher Warzone. Now,
And Starship Troopers 3. I don't think that gets as much hype as it should have.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to not talk about it at all. But and then you jump forward the next year. You had 2009. You had Watchmen, and that was the only superhero movie that came out for 2009.
Oh,
yeah, 2010
also had X-Men. Oh no, the greatest X-Men movie.
Which one?
Origins Wolverine.
Oh God, yeah, okay. So it had two. Yeah. Sorry, I'll phrase that. It had two superhero movies. We had two comic book movies: Watchmen, X-Men Origins. 2010, you had The Losers, you had Kick-Ass, and you had Iron Man 2. Now you jump forward. That was 2010. Jump forward to 2019. Well, even 2018. You had Black Panther, Endgame, Aquaman, Shazam, Ant-Man the Wasp, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse,
Deadpool 2,
Bumblebee. Oh, I mean, like,
Jeez, that was really kicking in.
That's 8. You had 8 films in a 12-month period. I mean, that's huge. And last year was no different. Last year there was a massive amount of comic book films again. Probably a little less, but it was still a huge amount of content to consume. And that's not to mention what streaming does now. I mean, we
the small screen, yeah.
When we may be living in a no theatre world,
there's still content being put out in the comic book landscape. Like the likes of The Boys was recently released. Walking Dead just wrapped up its 10th season. Fear the Walking Dead's currently streaming. What do we got next?
World Beyond?
World Beyond, that's the new one. You've got Scarlet Witch and Vision coming out shortly as well. I guess you'd call it. You wouldn't call this pre-COVID, but you'd call it a midst crisis. That there's still content being put out there, and people are still consuming it. So, which is it's kind of scary. Like when you just name off, I've just shocked myself really, because the amount of stuff that was being put out back in 2008, 9, 10 compared to now is a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where it's definitely oversaturated, to answer that question. To go back to the start of your question, it's definitely oversaturated. How do you perceive it going forth? Do you feel as though we're going to continuously get inundated to the point that people are going to get sick of it?
Well, it's sort of like the Infinity Saga itself was huge. To see where it goes next with Kang, hopefully, fingers crossed, Kang the Conqueror to fix all their timeline blemishes and the chaos that they've created because of Endgame. Would I like to see that go for another 23 movies? Yeah, but then that's another 10 years, and will that be too much? Are they just going to glaze over it and try to say, all right, this worked for Infinity War, let's use this same formula and see if we can crack it again? So I think we're going to see a lot of clashing themes. Like, I think the first one for me was Ant-Man, when you realize it wasn't just a superhero movie, it was a robbery heist movie with a comedy, and that happened to have superheroes in it. And that was pretty cool, but I think eventually they're going to go. They could go with a copy and paste and just slap it on because it's Marvel. People are going to see it. People are going to pay for it. They're going to make $1 billion off the next Avengers movie, whether it's good or not. And that could do its own harm. So eventually the product could become stale, or they can just be too reliant on, say, the big names and where do we go from here. But because eventually they got to kill. Well, who's the next one? Well, Thor could go for another 20 movies. That could be fine based on his age. But at some point, like Black Panther, where do they go with that next? Like, is everyone going to see Chad Boseman?
Yep, Boswick.
Yeah, are they going to just see him as the Black Panther? There's no more. Man, it's going to be a riot if they try to recast Tony Stark. Like, people are going to lose their mind. That's just not going to happen. Not Tony Stark, another Iron Man. They'll be like, no, Iron Man's Tony Stark. He is Iron Man. There is no more Iron Man. Iron Man's done. So that's kind of even a worry with, say, the Falcon and Winter Soldier going forth. But the comics, that's where it's a bit of envious. The comics can pull that off. They can change over characters and shake up the roster and just make it work. It's their own telling and how they go about it.
Yeah, it's fan service without being fan service in the world of comic books. I guess the audience for comics are a little bit different to the audience that see the films, because the audience of the comics don't have expectations, whereas film audiences have expectations because of trailers. In most cases, no one knows what they're getting when they first pick up a comic book. The best example for that is Umbrella Academy. I picked that up back when it first came out in 2008, and I didn't know what to expect. My only draw to that was because of Gerard Way, who was in My Chemical Romance. And I was like, I love the music. I'm a big fan of his art. I'll check out his comic. And that's what got me into reading. There was no expectation. Yeah. There was just the anticipation of what to expect. And I think with the film audience compared to the comic book audience, I think the comic book audience, in most cases, there are times where the comic book community can be angsty and can be selfish. But there's not that expectation of what they expect the Secret Wars to end like. It ends exactly how the writer and the editor want it to. So, with a film, people see trailers, they see leaked footage behind the scenes, there might be images put online.
Any interview with Mark Ruffalo.
Any of that and Tom Holland, where it's kind of spoiled from. They kind of get all the information before the film comes out, and then it's ruined for you. Which is something you and me have talked about prior to doing this podcast, because of a lot of films that the trailers pretty much include a whole film in it, and it just ruins the film experience. For you, I think you were talking about Ragnarok.
Nail on the head. Like, I remember that was the last trailer I saw for the big Marvel movies, because the fact that they showed you the Hulk in the trailer, that took away so much in the movie. Because what is it? Planet Hulk. Reading that, I've read that comic. That was awesome. As soon as they mentioned Sakaar in Thor, it would have all clicked. Like, wait, is this going to where I think it is? And then as the green bits of dust puff up, or the little firework things they got going on, that would have been such a great build, if not for already having it spoiled in the trailer that the Hulk's in it. And that's the downside of the internet. Everyone's wanting to put out information as quick as they can and just let everyone know, and the surprise factor's gone in the movies.
Yeah, and it can be frustrating, man. The Avengers films for me, there's always been that element of surprise, because they do try hard to contain those films as best they can. And the biggest thing was, for Endgame, spoilers, was Cap getting the Mjolnir.
Dude.
And to have that, can you imagine if that had been spoiled? That's gut-wrenching. That's great. It's a great scene, regardless if you're a comic book enthusiast or a film enthusiast. It's just a great scene all around.
There's a little feminine sound that came out of me when the first time I saw that. I was like, oh, yes. Just because the only tickle we got of that was from Age of Ultron, off it moving half an inch, not even that, just a millimeter. And then to have that come full circle at the end, jeez, I need a cigarette.
Was that the first time or the 13th time? I'm a bit confused.
Man, I watch that about once a month or every couple of weeks at this point. If I'm cooking in the house and I need something on the background, I'll just chuck on Endgame. Next thing I know, it's 3 hours gone.
How do you do that to yourself every time?
Oh, it's entertaining. There's always a cool bit. The big point I always jump into is the Trinity taking on Thanos. Like, jump in there and then skip to the bit where it's just everyone assembling. And that was so cool to have a 21 movie build at that point. And it was huge. Oh, man. I got goosebumps just thinking about it.
Mm. Yeah, look, they are great. They do them well. The constant complaint that I hear about those films is they need to rethink their formula. And they're probably right. They choose very safe directors, and they're not bad directors by any take, but they do choose safe directors that can do the Marvel way. And I think that I'm disappointed to see Scott Derrickson walk away from Doctor Strange 2, because I think he's a great director. I think his horror films are in a class of their own. And to have a film like...
Who's on board for it now? Is it Edgar Wright?
No, it's... I don't know if this is confirmed, but apparently it's meant to be Sam Raimi.
Oh, that's why it angered me. Now
which is why I find it weird, because you've gone from one horror director to another horror director. And again, I'm going to say it, I'm not a huge fan of Raimi's Spider-Man films. I love Sam Raimi as a director. He's a very masterful director. He has a vision in what he does, but his Spider-Man films aren't great to my eye. I love Evil Dead and I love Darkman. Like, Darkman is a superhero comic book film without being a comic book. He has that kind of thing, which will be interesting to see him bring it, if he has the gig, bring that into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Which plays part into going back to what we were talking about before about the other Spider-Man men coming into the film universe. And look, I'm all for it. If it means that it's going to be more entertaining, that's cool. I don't want to know. I'd rather not know now. I'd rather wait. and without getting spoilers about it. Same as what Hulk. I don't want to know if they're going to be in it. I'd rather be enjoy the movie and see it for itself. Another good.
Is it sort of hard for you as like, because you've read tons, and going into movies, is it hard to separate the source material from what they're showing you? Like when you're sitting there and taking it all in, if something's off, you're like, oh no, this should be like that because of that. So for an example would be Rogue and Mystique, their relationship that they don't touch on at all whatsoever in the X-Men universe. Does any of that like rub you the wrong way and make it hard to watch the movie?
I'll do a pro and a best way to acknowledge that is to talk about a pro and a con. A pro would be Watchmen. Watchmen the comic, the ending of the film has a giant squid land on New York. Now, to interpret that in a film would have been tricky in the time that it was originally done. So 2009, when Watchmen film came out, they changed it to a seismic equation that would have been Dr. Manhattan. Now, that was very clever. Even though it wasn't the same ending, I feel that they missed an opportunity, but in the TV show that was recently done, they actually touched upon it. So it can be done, but when they chose to make that film, I respect why they changed it. There's a reason why it can be done, and I understand in places they can't do it. They might be limited by...
we don't have big enough squid.
They don't have big enough squid.
Where do we get this from?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, no, okay. Yeah.
Exactly. To that point is exactly right. And like it just a con to that is one of my favorite comic book shows is The Walking Dead, and how they have changed some of the storyline and how they've tweaked it. The biggest disappointment is this is a huge spoiler, so if you haven't caught Walking Dead, too bad. Carl's death.
So what now? No, I'm up to date. Yeah.
I know you're up to date. Yes. I was waiting for that. I knew you were going to do that.
Did you say Carol?
But
Carl.
Yeah, Carol. I said Carol.
Did you say Coral?
Carl. I said Coral. You gotta say it like Coral. Coral. But his death was disappointing
in the TV show.
And
absolutely. What did he? How did he go in the end?
He got bitten by a zombie.
And then
he got bitten by a walker.
Yeah, and he's got letters that he gives off to.
I call him zombie. Yeah.
They spent an episode on that. Oh.
Yeah. Only to have Rick walk away. Only to have that actor that plays Rick walk away from them 2 seasons later. And for someone who's read the entire series, up to when it's now the comic book series is finished, Carl is the main character,
and that's
of it.
What it felt like the show was running towards. Because I feel that he did say that he's like, what kind of world are we going to have Carl grow up in? That's where it's going. Maybe the TV show is going with the daughter and seeing what world she's going to be part of. Oh, she's badass.
So they've changed a lot in that series, and some of it's been good, some of it's been less than impressive, and disappointing. Now, I mean, Rick leaving the series for me again is the series is about Rick. It is about Rick and bringing his children into a world full of dangerous things. It was really, really disappointing to see the series that I had been watching and reading for a long time kind of swing around and do that to you. So that's the con of when it's not respected and taken care of. It's funny because, I look back on that now and, everyone gets really upset with the whole Negan thing. And people turned off viewing. I'm like, I said it was disgusting. And it was disgraceful.
Because the governor did some bad shit,
it's
man.
Exactly.
Like in the comics, the graphic novel, the governor did some bad shit.
Yeah.
That they did not put in the show.
Yeah, and exactly, yeah. Well, yeah. Okay, yeah, now I've got, actually, I know what you're talking about, yes. They teased it, but they never did it. They never went for with it, and everyone was grossed out by that. But that's exactly how it happens in the comics. They basically did that scene, apart from Abraham, because he cops it earlier in the comics. They did it word tit for tat, and to me, that's not disappointing at all. That's exactly what the villain's supposed to be. He's supposed to be hated, and then he has a redemption.
Because they gave you a big reason to hate Negan. Oh, straight out of the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And it's on Robert Kirkman's part for the writing. It's brilliant because you hate this guy, and then he has a redemption path in the Whisperer War. So it's a real love-hate relationship with the series, man. It's hard because digesting what's left of it, trying to figure out where they're going with it, where they're going with the Rick movies. Do you think
they've got an end in sight? Do you reckon they're just circling the drain, or do you reckon they've actually got like a finish line? They're like, hey, cool, this is where we want to take it. How do we get there? Not like, how can we squeeze this?
I think the current predicament has changed the landscape. I remember them saying when they first started that, I think they said 13 seasons of it.
13 seasons of the movie. No.
For anyone listening, that's a Community reference. Ladders.
Ah! Yeah, probably the greatest joke in Community. Oh.
I knew I'd get it right. I say there.
Every time.
I think they're playing sleight of hand with us at the moment, because I've caught up with Fear the Walking Dead, and I'm watching The World Beyond, and The World Beyond has a limited series. It's running for 2 seasons, 10 episodes each.
Oh, cool.
And it finishes. If my calculations are correct, it'll finish before The Walking Dead finishes, and I feel as though Fear has only so much ground that it can cover before it becomes tiresome, and I feel as though we're going to come to that. Now, this is speculation. This is my theory. I feel as though they're going to come back and they're going to bridge everything together for the final 12 episodes of The Walking Dead, and everything will come in. I don't reckon we'll get the movies. I reckon Rick will come back, and I reckon it'll just be a summary of the series. Now, I don't know if they're going to do that whole spin-off series with Carol and Daryl, the Carol and Daryl hour,
the L word.
But I feel as though that it's kind of a slide of the hand at the moment. I really think they're playing another card close to their chest, and they'll let us know when it comes time. Because there's a lot of plays on where Rick is at the moment in the other series, that the organisation that's taken him. There's so much going on in these other 2 shows, and you kind of need to be watching them to kind of get the full story. And I feel as though after watching those other 2 series, I feel as though they're doing something else. And I hope they are. I kind of hope they do wrap it up. Wrap it up on a strong note. Don't drag it out anymore. It needs to. It's kind of it's had a good run. I mean, it's going to basically be 13.
Is that what Walking Dead's up to? 10?
Yeah, so they've just finished 10.
Yeah.
They're doing 6 new episodes for season 10, and then we're getting, I think, apparently 24 episodes for season 11.
Jeez.
And that's it.
So
basically, we're going to...
First season was like 7 episodes, wasn't it? I think like TS something...
6 episodes.
Whatever the...
6 episodes, yes. 6 episodes from... 6 episodes season 1, 10 episodes season 2, and then it changed to 16 episodes a season.
Oh, that's so long.
And then, 24 episodes for the final season. So basically, season 11 will be season 11 and season 12, as I see it.
Okay.
So you're basically getting 12 seasons. So yeah, for me, it's very love-hate relationship in the sense of a comic book versus the movie, or versus
Will
TV.
you feel cheated at the end? Will you feel cheated at the end after devoting 14 years of your life to the TV show if they really just throw it in? Or do you reckon they've got that respect for it? They're like, nah, we need to finish this. We need to make this, like, we need to stamp our name on it.
No, I think they'll stamp their name on it for the sake of it being such a... It was one of the highest rating shows when it started.
Oh, man, yeah.
And to have it finish on a strong note would be more positive for its send-off rather than having it... I mean, if anything's to go by, what happened with Game of Thrones...
Oh,
You can't
Yeah.
you can't fall in that same trap. Another great example more recently is Dexter. I mean, Dexter was such a poor ending, and yet
they're bringing that back,
they're
aren't they?
bringing it back for another 10 episodes. So
Yeah.
the idea of ending a series, or ending a comic, it has to end on a strong note. Now, the comic, again, spoilers,
And that's all wrapped up
it's
now, isn't it?
finished. Now, the comic
Okay, yeah.
itself, it ends with Carl. Ends with Carl living a life, a happy life with a family. And there's a world that's been established that still involves walkers, but it's he got to grow up. Now, to me, even though people complained that it wasn't really a strong ending, it was still a satisfying ending to the series.
Because something like that, like a zombie apocalypse, ends with either there's a cure, everyone on Earth dies, or the real crappy ending, it was all a dream. But then, if you do have closure, it's got to be a world, yeah, where they'd have to be able to survive with it and still get day to day and get a bit of normality, but still have that threat.
It was a solid ending to a series that basically had run its course, and it kind of we didn't know it was happening.
Oh,
we
really?
didn't-
Just sort of hit you out of
So
nowhere.
apparently they already had so comic book stores actually already had their next orders in place for the next 3 issues leading up to this issue, which was one for 100 was it 148 issue 148 or 149 I can't remember. I can actually tell you 'cause it's sitting right here. Sorry, that was 193. That was horrible.
Ooh, you got two of the numbers.
You
were off by a few.
I was off a lot. But yeah, they kind of had orders up till the next 3 issues, I think, or 2 issues, and then they decided, like, basically, the last issue was announced the day it was released to the stores. So I mean, it was a great marketing strategic
Oh,
because
genius!
those,
Absolutely.
well, me included, the ones that got that first print, you know, it's a collector's item now. As much as I don't see it as a collector's item, it's an important piece of the puzzle. And yeah, I mean, they just ended it like that. I don't know if that was Kirkman's plan from the beginning, but and I think like more recently they've done Rick's brother, his story, because he's mentioned in the comics, and then they've done a Negan issue as well about what happens to
They can
Negan.
venture
Yeah,
off.
so they can venture off if they want to do that. I don't know if they will. I think there's just little side stories to wrap up the characters that we know of but never saw again. So yeah, that's probably the best way to put together that question you asked about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, when you said that, I'm like, what question?
It was the question of when they treat the source material poorly, does it upset you?
That's right. Yep. Because the next big one that, as you just mentioned before, was Umbrella Academy. Now, when you mentioned it to me, like, hey, sweet, they've made this show. It's from this comic. The comic was really sick. It's Gerard Way. Get onto the TV show. And as soon as it dropped, I watched it in one sitting, and just knocked it out of the park. And then remember getting to you, and I was like, sweet, so what'd you think? And then you told me everything else that they just glazed over. And when I look back at it, it was rushed. They don't give any time to flesh out certain characters. And all of a sudden, they've tried to cram a whole bunch of stories in a 10-hour film.
Yep. It for me, and this is another great example of why I would much rather the comics to the TV shows or the films, is because I guess Umbrella is very close to what X-Men is, but I love Umbrella for more of its obscureness, because they are misfits. They are, I guess, they're more of a family than what X-Men were. And it has that weirdness to it that I just don't feel the show embraced. The comic book, you know, we spend a huge amount of time with Pogo. Vanya is in the TV show, she's made a central character, and in the
It very much felt like
yeah,
that,
in the series she's not. She's more of a background character until there's a couple of key moments in her story that come
to the front end, to the story. And
Because her as the villain, they in the TV show, they hit her in plain sight. Like it was almost when it came full circle, you're like, well, I expected that. You've shown me enough of it.
whereas in the
This makes
comics, you
sense.
didn't expect it until, and even the villain who turns Anya in the comics was completely stripped of any of his motive, the motive he had in the story. It was very frustrating. So that when they do that, it's like, okay, you're not even trying to interpret this to screen. And again, it goes back to the most recent Watchmen TV show. It's not based on a comic book as such. Like, there's no storyline that's similar to it, but it respects the source materials to the point that it would include a fucking giant squid. I mean, case closed. The obscurity of the Umbrella Academy just wasn't interpreted into the TV show. And it did it. I think it did it in service to people who understand it. Like, I think the closest character they nailed in that would be Klaus.
Oh, he was fantastic.
He's probably the closest they got to it. Again, Pogo doesn't get enough screen time, which really disappointed me because he's an integral part of the family. He's the kind of the glue that gels them together. So
There it is. I was waiting for it. He's the Phil Coulson.
Yeah.
I'm the glue.
And yeah, wow, you've just opened a wound there. I really don't like that TV show.
And they're going to keep making it, man, because it's getting numbers, it's drawing people in, and it's what third season looks to be about what the Sparrow Academy. So does that tickle like with the source material or where they're at? Like, is that going to be disappointing how they handle it, or is that a really good story arc?
I actually am
'Cause that's what Ben's alive now in this, isn't he?
in the TV show.
Oh, Ben should be alive in that third season.
Well, it's an alternate universe they've come to.
Yeah.
I haven't finished reading the third volume yet. I've been a bit lax with that, so I haven't actually finished reading it. But I honestly, I don't know where they're going. They're probably going to overlap the comics in the sense of of where it's at, which is
So would that be disappointing for someone that, say, does delve into it? Oh no, it'd open up way more information. If you were to see a TV show like that and then go back and read the source material and you're like, wait, you know what? There's way more of a world than they actually could show me. And your imagination can just kick into gear and just start recreating this whole thing based on what you have seen and just make it explode and make the whole universe way bigger than it is.
Yep. A good example of that is Deadly Class. Deadly Class was a good series for the one season it ran for, and then it got cancelled. But I watched the series first. I'd read the first issue a long time ago, and I was like, it's cool. I just didn't really get into it. Anyway, I went back and read the comics. And the storytelling that you get in a comic book, it really fleshes out the characters. And that's what I love. I love hearing about the characters that make the series what it is. And that's what it does in Umbrella Academy, and that's what it does in Deadly Class. The only one that would come close to it, I think, is The Walking Dead. That actually comes in and actually builds its characters up. I have heard, and I haven't read The Boys, that The Boys does a good job of that. It comes close again to being the interpretation, like they do change characters' genders for the sake of it.
Did you just say doo-doo?
Doo-doo. I said doo-doo.
You said
they
doo-doo.
do.
Sorry.
They do. Again, it's just, yeah, it's hard because sometimes they hit the nail on the head and sometimes they just miss the mark, and it can be really dissatisfying. 300. I mean, for a guy that did 300, then to come and do Batman versus Superman, I mean, like 300 is exactly page for page of the graphic novel. Yeah. God, man. We could go on. We could talk about this for ages.
So looking ahead, is that what's a comics story arc or a certain story that you'd like to see adapted to the big screen? Like, what's something you'd like to be, say, sitting there and like, all right, this is it. For me, big moments in The Walking Dead were just seeing the insane size of the hordes that they kept producing. That was cool to have that in your imagination, but then see it on the big screen. Cool. Seeing Transformers click into gear and actually transform in front of you. That's what you always wanted as a kid on the big screen. Is there anything comic wise, or is there a story you'd like to see told on the big screen?
Talking Bread.
Yeah.
No. Fuck, that's a hard one. I'd love to see.
Because there'd have to be a bit of concern as well.
I'd love
whether they're going to handle it or do it justice.
It's funny because, like, I love Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy. I think his Hellboy is very stylized. It's very Sam Raimi, Tim Burton. You know, it's that kind of superhero film. But the Hellboy that was released last year, I think it was last year or the year before. No, it was last year. I liked that because I felt that was more in line with the comic books. They really did bring it to life. It's just a shame that it flopped in the cinema and we won't see anymore because it wasn't a financial success. For me, I'd love to see them do. Jesus, I don't know. I'm at the point where I'm just happy reading comics now.
Let your imagination just take over and run wild.
I'd love to see them do something with the Turtles. Do something proper with the Turtles again. Now I've heard they are doing something with Seth Rogen. I mean, he's done The Boys. He's done Preacher. He did treat those with source material with respect. So I hope he can do the same thing for the Ninja Turtles.
That's a third one in our generation. Hey,
look, for me, I think I'm very, very, very still attached to the Netflix Daredevil series.
that's right.
I think that I'd love to see that cast and that story be introduced into the Disney owned Marvel Cinematic Universe. I want that brought into it. Because I'm guessing hopefully we'll find out what's going to happen because that whole contract thing with Marvel and Netflix is about to end. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. So I'd love to see the likes of Daredevil and Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, Punisher, Iron Fist, all come into the fold, all be introduced into it.
Just snapping people's necks and having Ant-Man see it and throw up. Because that's not going to mesh.
No.
They're so violent compared to the
MCU. Those series were very much, again, they were respected the source material. And the people who created those series actually were comic book readers. They respected it, they understood it, and they had the longevity to, if it wasn't for the whole debacle with Disney and all that, they had the longevity to be able to continue to follow down that path. I mean, that final season we got on Netflix of Daredevil, it was very much it was tit for tat for the Frank Miller Born Again story arc. And yeah, that's probably what I want to see more. That's what I want to see more. I'd love to see him come back into the fold because it's a thoroughly entertaining story that they told. And again, it brings us back to the TV thing. The TV has more time to flesh out characters.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's probably the only thing that would be really enticing for me. I'm just happy reading comics. I love reading comics. What can I say? It's why I make comics. I love making comics too. So,
because it gives you a chance for imagination to be able to build the world that they've given you. Sort of here are the breadcrumbs. Now visualize this yourself. Whereas movies are like, hey, cool. This is what it looks like. This is what's happening.
Yeah, you're thrown into the mix really quickly, and you've got 2 to 2.5 hours to get to know these characters and.
And connect and actually care about what happens.
Yeah. Whereas with the TV show, you've got 8 hours to 16 hours to get involved and get to know these characters and their flaws.
And still not care about Karen. Is it Karen?
Karen.
The lawyer from Daredevil?
The lawyer, the admin, or their
Yeah, the one that's always in the way. Trying to help.
Yeah.
I just don't like characters like that. I've started watching New Girl recently, and she's always trying to help and ends up in the way and making things worse. And it's, yeah, nah. It just reminds me of Daredevil.
Bloody Karen.
Oh, I was hoping she got shot in that episode where it's in the church. Oh, no, it wasn't shot. It was a staff thrown at her, like in the chest.
Yep.
But hits the priest instead. Yeah.
Yeah. And
then what do? They spend an episode on her next. Great. That's not what I wanted.
Because that's what happens in the comics.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh. Imagine being halfway through a comic and be like, all right, cool, this is pivotal. What do I have to read now? Oh.
Do you know what, though? They executed that really well, because I actually thought for a split second that they were going to offer.
I was all about it. Her and Pepper Potts.
Because things have gotten so bad in that... Like, things have gotten so bad for him in that season. I was like, cool, they're actually going to follow it, because they were going pretty close to the comics there. And I was like, okay, this is going to happen.
Do it.
This is... Yeah, so they didn't, but, I mean, it's pretty good storytelling. I'll give them that much. They did a really good job.
It was fantastic. And a bullseye that we deserved.
Yes. Yeah.
Not Colin Farrell.
So, yeah, that's I would love to see that come back into the fold. And I really hope it does, because fuck man, it was the closest we got to an actual Daredevil series that was worthwhile.
Oh, it was fantastic. Entertainment, great drama.
Oh. Yeah, that was good. That was a good question, Muzz.
I'm really happy I wrote that down. I wrote that down a couple of days ago, and I'm going through all these like loose bits of paper. I'm like, I wonder what I can ask. The other question is, what superhero power would you give yourself? But then that's like a 3-hour conversation in itself, because you start putting parameters on it and being like, all right, cool, let's work out what this power is. So we're not going to do that. But out of curiosity,
we can do that next time we can do that next time we come down and catch up. That'll be a 3-hour conversation once we have a few drinks.
Yeah.
What superpower would I want? I would want a bat called Lucille.
Like Wuhan bat, or do you mean like an object?
No, I'm talking about.
I thought you meant like with wings and stuff. I'm like, that's how we got into trouble in the first place, isn't it?
No, I'd want the power of being a billionaire playboy philanthropist. Yeah. Who dresses up like a bat. Who dresses like a bat at night.
I was a boy. Now I'm a bat. Man.
And they'll call me
Vengeance Man. And is this a daytime or a nighttime job?
Not. It's both
24/7. You taking public holidays for this?
24/7, exactly. We're like,
yeah,
we're 7-Eleven, all right?
Yeah.
7-Eleven man. Yes, that's a really good question. We'll talk about it next time you come down. We'll have many beers and discuss our superpowers.
It's a good one to flesh out. I feel there's like around maybe 4, 5 big topics that when you start talking to people and they nerd out a little bit, that's one of them. The other one would be like, oh, what's your zombie plan? Time travel. That's another big one. Artificial intelligence. Another topic that can really stir the pot for a good couple of hours around a campfire. But yeah, zombie plan's always hilarious. You start talking about that and then you're like, all right, cool, but what if this happens? Where are you going to go? Everyone should have a zombie plan in case it happens, but it's never going to hit the way it's meant, the way we've seen in comics and movies. We're not going to be running around clueless for the first 3 years. People are going to be like, all right, cool, I think that's a zombie. Let's just kill that person.
If this year's to go by anything, everyone's just going to go and buy toilet paper.
Yeah, toilet paper, and then the alcoholic's going to be like, oh, sweet, got to stock up on beer in case they stop making it. Like, stop.
Toilet paper and flour.
Yeah. Oh. Apparently rice was also on the list. Like, people were going nuts shopping, buying all the rice. There's now a rice shortage next year. Oh, humans.
Funny world we live in.
This is why the robots are going to take over, and they're going to be fine.
Damn you, Skynet.
Yeah. Oh, what is that
But-
one? Genesis.
Oh, fuck.
It was meant to be
Don't know.
Genesis, but they've spelt it wrong.
I stopped watching after Salvation. I was good.
Oh man, they just kept
good.
going. Yeah, no.
It was good.
What's the next
good-
one's
good
like an
time.
alternate timeline where John Connor's dead. He's killed within like 10 minutes after Judgment Day. I'm like, this doesn't make sense.
It's been great having you on, Muzz, again
Thank you very much for having me.
for the third time, and talking just talking comic books for a change. We do talk to creators and writers and illustrators and various people in the industry, but it's been good to just talk shop, talk about what comic books are to us. And Muzz is a good friend, and he's been very supportive in the history of my comic book creating and listening to the podcast as well. And it was great to have you on tonight, Muzz.
I can't wait to play Tony Hawk and listen to this in a couple of weeks. This is great.
Yeah, it's been a great episode. It's been great to talk shop. But yeah, guys, thank you again for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We will do something similar in the future, and we'll see you again next week on the Halftone Effect.
We're clear.